Good morning, everybody. It's Steve Brown from Mirae Securities, Head of Institutional Sales. Joining us this morning, we have Mr. Eric Levinson, who's the Deputy Managing Director of VinaCapital. Joined VinaCapital in April 2020 and is helping lead the development of the investment solutions, including a lot of onshore and offshore funds for VinaCapital. Eric, thank you for joining us this morning.
Good morning. Thank you for having me.
Mate, do tell us about the VinaCapital Investment Solutions. We've actually partnered with you. We have our company onboarded with you for all of your local funds now and connected through our back end, your back end, our website, apps. Our clients can now access the funds on offer. They can peruse the funds that they'd like to invest in, and more importantly, invest anytime, anywhere using our app on mobile phone. Yeah. So, tell us more about these funds.
So, we're very fortunate. So, Stephen, VinaCapital was founded 20 years ago this month. And so, initially when VinaCapital was founded in 2003, it was really about a way for international investors to access Vietnam. We have a London listed closed-end fund called VOF. We have two offshore funds. One's a daily listed UCITS fund. One is a Cayman vehicle. I'm proud to say all three funds, VOF, VVF, and VAF, have outperformed the benchmarks. 1, 3, 5 performance has been fantastic. It's really about the types of exposure people are looking for. Our partnership, which we founded recently, is really about helping Vietnamese investors now access the market. And so as the emerging market middle class has grown in Vietnam, as more people have gotten interested in investing, VinaCapital, which launched a mutual fund family in 2013, has put more investment in there. And so as you mentioned, I joined in 2020. And so what we've been able to do over the last 2.5 years is really focus a lot on education, on training. We have a lot of content for individual investors who've never really invested before in the stock market. The number of people investing, whether it's individual equities, individual corporate bonds, has exploded, particularly during COVID. And so, we're proud to say the 4 funds that we offer today, we have one fixed income fund, one balanced fund, and 2 equity funds. They all lead their respective categories, and we have some worthy competitors, so we're very proud to say our performance is great. But what we're looking to do is we're trying to help investors understand, by hiring dedicated professionals like VinaCapital, they can go on with the rest of their lives.
Sure. Now, with those funds, our investors who will invest in your funds can get on board and participate in the market with a broad, diverse spread of equities in the underlying funds for as little as 100,000 VND, which is quite remarkable as well. So the 6.5 million or so individual domestic retail accounts that are now extant in Vietnam is a huge amount. As you noted recently at your Vietnam Investor Conference, which was a great success, there is, though, a fair bit of duplication. One of the phenomenon is individual retail investors will have more than one trading brokerage account, more than one bank account. But at the end of the day, it's a quantum leap from where it was, and also such as the development of the other things that people can do, such as margin lending. Our company had around about 200 million drawn down margin loan book in 2019. Now it's over $500 million. So your funds as well have seen quantum growth, and as well as that outperformance. You noted before the 3-year performance of the UCITS fund was around about 10.5% versus the comparative benchmark index of 0.6, and the outperforming local fund, the VSAF, you've had there 3 years 17.1% versus the index of just 1.7. So that leads us on to the next thing. You had some great milestones there. The funds and their respective purposes and strategies for the local funds.
And I'm just going to make one quick comment, because if you heard Stephen, he gave a 0.6 number and then a 1.7 number for 3 years. Well, how do you do that? The first one for VVF, our UCITS fund, was the performance for the index in dollar terms. The second one for the local fund was actually in VND terms. So I just want to make sure it is the same as of date, but I just want to make sure people caught that. So in terms of our lineup, it's really important that we have a suite of portfolios depending on what people's risk tolerance is. And so for our offshore funds, VVF is a daily listed UCITS fund. VAF is a Cayman feeder that allows people to access the local funds. And then VOF on the offshore side is a combination of private equity and public equity. It's listed on the FTSE, on the London Exchange. It's really interesting, a FTSE 250 company. And it's the only Vietnam fund that pays a dividend. Now, within our local market, VSAF, which you mentioned, focuses primarily on small and mid-cap companies. And so what's interesting there, if you are an international investor and you're looking at small and mid tend to be more volatile, that's true as an asset class, but we're not buying every company. Our fund tends to own 25 to 30 companies. And when we look at kind of the upside downside capture, VSAF actually has the same type, actually a little slightly lower drawdown than the index, and actually about the same as our large cap portfolio. So VEOF is more of a traditional large cap portfolio, VSAF more small and mid. And then we have our balanced fund, VIBF, half equities, half fixed income. And it's important there because oftentimes we get questions that say, okay, well, if you're bullish on equities, does VIBF go 75 or 80% stocks? Or if you're bearish, do you go 75, 80% fixed income? And we did a lot of research. We talked to our clients, we talked to our partners, and we decided that a 50-50 split was really the best way to have a strategic asset allocation. Many investors in Vietnam, certainly in mutual funds, it's the first time they make an investment. And we thought it was really important not only to not try to time the market, but also to give people a customer experience that gives them the appreciation potential of 50% equities, but also the stability of 50% fixed income. Now, what was interesting, last year, the equity market in Vietnam was up over 35%. Our balanced fund, VIBF, was actually up over 33 because the equity, the stock selection was so good of that 50% equities that we were actually almost able to perform the same as the benchmark with only half the equity exposure. And then this year, the market, as you know, here we are in November, has been challenged certainly in September and October. The reality is our balanced fund has outperformed the broad equity market by more than double digits. So it's been a fantastic customer experience.
Sure. And you just noted very wisely, you get diversity. You're not just stuck in a deposit interest rate, term deposit environment that can stymie the potential upside there, as you notice, having a split with the equity component. Yeah. So now, Eric, with the funds that you've got in place, do you see them evolving at all? And then, if so, in which ways, ESG, CSR focus style?
So, it's interesting. People who have invested in Vietnam before, may know this. If people haven't, people are very surprised that ESG has actually been very much part of what VinaCapital has done since inception. Now, the ES and G, the G has always been the most important part. So we only invest in companies where we have a very solid trust in the management of the company. So the G, the governance, has always been important. Now, within our framework, we recently hired someone from, let's just say, long-tenured ESG consulting firm to join us full-time as an ESG analyst. And so he's helped us develop a framework so every single company we have in our research coverage universe gets an ESG score. So we are not exclusionary. If you have a low score, we can still own you. If you have a high score, we don't necessarily own you more. But what it helps us do is engage with the companies where we're public investors. So we say to them, hey, here's where you rank. If you're able to move this up, we believe you'll actually improve your business efficiency. You may improve your margins. You may actually generate a higher stock price. And so what we've seen is that many of the companies in Vietnam, particularly ones who have many foreign shareholders, they actually want to know how they can improve their ESG scores. So we do this internally to help us think about managing risk. We also do it so we can engage with companies to help them improve their performance, which ultimately improves their marketability to foreign investors. So it's really a win-win relationship. And so 5 years ago, 10 years ago, ESG was maybe not as understood by the local companies. Now, certainly for all the large cap companies that have foreign shareholders, they're keenly aware of what ESG is, and we're absolutely involved there. The last point I'll make is more relative to VOF, which is our foreign fund. It's a combination of private and public equity. Oftentimes we'll engage directly with this company called ERM, which is a leading international ESG and sustainability consulting firm, we'll work with them when we're looking for private investments to help us understand what is the environmental impact, what are some of the labor practices. And so what we have found again is that companies in Vietnam are very, very open to this. As you mentioned, we just had our investor conference. We had a leading company, VHC, which is a fishing company, come in, and they talk about all the new sustainable practices that they've employed, because when they're selling their fish and gases to the European market, you know, the Sainsbury's and Tesco's of the world have certain rules in place. And so what we're finding is once the Vietnamese companies understand that they're consumers or they're buyers, that ESG is important to them, they absolutely make sure that they follow best practices. So for us, it's been part of what we've done for the last 20 years. It's been a lot easier to engage with companies because now they're aware of it.
Sure, subtle active advocacy
Absolutely.
in the shareholding relationship that you've got with the corporates.
Yeah.
Now, the funds that you've got, the leading funds that you've got, you mentioned the VIBF and also VSAF.
Yeah.
Some of the fund managers and PMs and their team that you have with those are very highly regarded, very respected. We'll be having, for instance, the VSAF PM on in the coming time to have a Vietnamese language dialogue with our head of funds distribution to enlighten everyone at Mirae Asset about the virtues of that fund. But could you just give us a bit of a overview of the milestones, achievements of those funds, and where you see the penetration, typical target markets of your funds?
That's a great question.
Yeah.
So, you know, when we think of it, I think there's two things I really want to bring up, and I'll say this as clearly a Westerner who's been in Vietnam for about 2.5 years, and that VinaCapital has about 200 staff members, about 170 here in Ho Chi Minh City. And I'm one of, I think, 8 people at the company that doesn't speak Vietnamese. So we think of ourselves as the best of both worlds. We really think of it as a local company with international standards. And so when I think of VSAF, it's a great example, primarily small and mid cap, also pays attention to a lot of companies with FOL, foreign ownership restrictions. Last year, just as an example, it was the #1 performing fund in all of Vietnam. You looked at any Vietnam fund, onshore, offshore, it was up 66% last year. The index was up about 37. And so, you know, that's a pretty big outperformance. Year to date, it's also outperforming the index by over 10%. And that's pretty impressive. And so I think the thing that we're most proud of is that we've been able to outperform on the upside and outperform on the downside. Because oftentimes you see funds that outperform on the upside, then have a beta of 1.2, 1.3, and they get crushed. And so the fact that we've been able to manage the portfolio, and the portfolio is over 50 million US, so it's getting bigger in terms of size, but still very small and nimble on a global scale. I think Fung and our research team have done an unbelievable job repositioning the portfolio. She's focused more small mid on export companies that have really done a great job, ports as well. VIBF, again, looking at a portfolio, 50 equity, 50 debt. A lot of people, again, I'm speaking English here, so I'll just say, you know, interest rates in Vietnam are quite high. And so we're able to buy, we have our own internal credit rating system. We're buying bonds with yields 8.5%, 9% with a 1 or 2 year duration. And so we're not taking a lot of duration risk. And these are companies that we know very, very well. Public companies issuing debt that we have a lot of confidence in. We're getting 8 to 9% on the fixed income. And again, last year, the total portfolio was up 35%. Year to date, again, outperforming the broad market, but by a huge margin. It's not, you know, our benchmark for that is half equities, half fixed income, but we're outperforming significantly based on the stock picks and the fixed income. So when I think of milestones in target segments, you know, one of the things that we did at VinaCapital, we actually hired an outside agency about 2 years ago to help us understand target market. And so in Vietnam, there's 100 million people. We're not actually targeting 100 million. I want to be very, very clear. Our focus is really on 3 segments, and we think it's about 4 to 5 million people. We think by 2030 that 4 to 5 million people will likely be 10 million people as the emerging middle class grows here in Vietnam. But we divide them into 3 categories. Now these are the titles that the marketing company came up with. It's entrepreneurs, it's connoisseurs, and what we call progressive enjoyers. And so the last category, progressive enjoyer, think of that as kind of the working mother, the working father, the middle management who has a very good office job, who has already a property, maybe 2 properties, they're taking care of their family, and they want to hire someone to manage money for them. They're like, hey, I'm busy, I want to take care of my family, I'm interested in investing, but I know I don't have the expertise, and I also don't have the time. And so we're working with securities firms, we're working with banks to partner with them to help them then communicate and identify this segment, to really help them understand that they want to fund a lifestyle, they want to maintain their lifestyle, they want to invest for growth, they don't want to do it themselves. Now, for the connoisseurs and entrepreneurs, these are actually primarily male, primarily urban. And what's interesting there is they're often early adopters. They're maybe already investing themselves. They maybe founded a company, they're an entrepreneur. And so there it's about helping people understand that you're unbelievable at what you do. But for investing, you should hire someone that's unbelievable at what they do. And at VinaCapital, we employ more CFAs than any other company in Vietnam. We have a research team of 12 people. We have 8 different portfolio managers whose sole focus is managing money. And so it's really about educating these 2 segments about, hey, you're great at what you do, but you really want to hire an expert. You're not going to fix your own car. You're not going to fix your own plumbing. And what's more important to you than money? Your family, but probably nothing else, or your company. And so what we try to do is communicate to people the credibility that we have, the relationships that we have in the corporate market, the access we have to CEOs, to CFOs, to supply chains. That's all we do. All we do is we manage money. And so we were able to help people understand what the role is of an investment firm, what our value proposition is, and to help those people understand that if you want to run your business, that should be your sole focus. If you want to manage money, you want to hire somebody whose sole focus is managing money. And so as we think about the growth, particularly of our domestic business here in Vietnam, we're focusing on those 3 core segments, and we're focusing on partnering with securities firms and other distribution partners. At VinaCapital, we're not focused on growing a direct business. People can come to VinaCapital directly, but at the end of the day, we'd much prefer that someone work with a securities company or a bank so they're getting the advice.
Exactly. And that's the feedback that we've been having from our clients, because we're advancing the education process of our single stock security advisors into becoming more wealth managers as per the Mirae Asset global platform of wealth advice rather than stock picking advice, and time in the market versus timing in the market, as you noted before, with VSAF and also VIBF. So our 2 companies are collaborating quite intensely with training our 305, I think it is at the moment, client-facing advisors, with much more to come, in wealth management, long-term planning, and asset allocation in a portion of local open-ended funds such as VinaCapital's. Eric, it's been a pleasure to have you on Mirae Asset Securities, Mirae Asset Live. Your team will be engaging a lot more to come with our client-facing advisors and also with our fund distribution team. And we look forward to having your colleagues on in the coming months to expand a deep dive into each of these funds that we've discussed this morning. VSAF in particular will be our first one. Eric Levinson, Deputy Managing Director from VinaCapital, and Steve Brown, Head of Institutional Sales from Mirae Asset Securities. Have a good morning.
Thank you very much.